Hello, everyone. You might have watched already my discussion about the introduction. So let's head on to the first lesson in Unit 1. So here we will be talking about, in this unit, we will review communication. I know you already have an idea about this. Its processes. Later on in the next lesson, which will be discussed by your classmates, we'll talk about also principles and the ethics that communication entails. And it's important for us to gain higher familiarity on the subject of communication as a concept, phenomenon, and as an inevitable human activity so that we become effective and responsible communicators. So let me start. So these are the expected learning outcomes, and at the end of this lesson, you are expected to be able to identify and explain the forms and models of communication along with the causes of communication failure. So we also have to, um, of course, know the different forms, the different ways of communicating, the different models that are representing the processes involved in different communication settings, and then also the noises that causes communication breakdown. You will also be expected to compare and contrast verbal and nonverbal communication. Also, I think these two are already given. These are actually, if you can notice, these are given in all lessons that you will be participating in activities to enhance your communicative competence and also appreciate the value of understanding the lesson. In this case, it's the process of communication. So let me begin with this activity. I think many of you have already done this activity. I am just including this in my recording um, to also include those classes and also students who were not able to be there when I was discussing from the beginning. So let's boost your word power here. So here, this exercise contains words with missing letters. So you have to guess the word that corresponds to the given meaning by providing the missing letters. So I'll be giving you enough time to figure out the word here. So the first one starts with I, and there's an R in the fifth letter as the fifth letter, and then T and E at the end, of course, E. So this means capable of influencing each other. So what word is this? Capable of influencing each other. So I want you to answer this by yourself without really looking into or searching it on the internet, not looking into um, dictionaries. So what is your answer? So this is interactive. Yes. So interactive. We will be discussing this later. And how about the second item? This starts with letter N. I think this is very easy. This means not using spoken or written language to communicate. So what is this? This is non-verbal. So I think this must be also specified that um, this is non-word. Okay, non-verbal. Next, number 3. This starts with letter D, and this means an extended communication dealing with some particular topic. So extended, this is your cue. So this is discourse. So this is discourse. Next, number 4. This starts with letter A, and this means expressing in coherent verbal form. What is this word? It might seem like assimilation, but it is not assimilation. So what word is this? It is articulation. In verbal, we articulate. So this involves words. Next, number 5. This starts with letter D, and this means the act of spreading something. So I think this is very easy. Marites. So this is dissemination. Okay. All right. So I think that's it for this exercise. I hope you um, you were warmed up by this exercise. But there are still other questions. So this is actually supposed to be done in class because I'm supposed to ask you this. I think my PowerPoint presentation has been converted to a file to fit in the this software. So it's going out of the bubble. Anyways, in what way are those words related to communication? So we have the first one. The first one is, wait a minute. Okay, we have this. Here we have interactive, we have nonverbal, we have discourse and articulation. So I guess this is supposed to be in the classroom since we have to interact, and I am supposed to also get your opinions and your ideas about this. But when we say communication, there is interaction happening. So it's really interactive. It might be an interaction within oneself because you might be communicating within yourself or um, with other people. So there is always interaction happening. And in communication, it's not only verbal, but we also engage in nonverbal communication using signs, symbols, gestures, body language. So there are also other ways of communicating other than using words. So next we have discourse. So discourse is extended. So we are engaged in some discourse and certain discourses if we are explaining things about a specific topic. So we try to develop a certain like a stretch of ideas. So that can be considered a discourse. If we are focusing or we are talking about a specific or central idea, then and we explain it, we try to give examples, reason out, that's already a discourse. And then articulation, of course, when we are involving words, may be spoken or written, so we try to articulate those, and that's why um, it is also that's why it's also essential to enhance your articulation because um, this can aid, right? This can aid the delivery of message. So this is the way you form clear and distinct sounds when you are speaking. So it's putting into words also your ideas um, or feeling um, about a specific message, okay, or about a specific topic. So next we have dissemination. So dissemination, I think this is also evident when you're communicating, especially if like this, I am disseminating information, I'm sharing these information with you, and um, there's an exchange, not necessarily exchange. There is a flow of ideas. So this is um, widely somehow, especially in TV or in radio, we are spreading something or spreading information, widely spreading information to other people. So that is communication. This is usually happening wherever, like in class, at workplace, if there's a meeting. So we try to disseminate information. Next, I have here some warm up questions which I'm supposed to discuss with you. And since I am already um, recording my presentation, so we will not be able to discuss this ourselves. So I am supposed to really get your thoughts about this. So this is just like warm up questions to get your brains ready about what we are supposed to or what we're. Okay. So we have here what happens, what do you understand about communication? Is communication static or does it involve a process? These are things that we will be discussing in this lesson. What happens during communication? Can you communicate with yourself? And how? How many people does it take to really communicate and why? And in what ways can you communicate with others? So these are the ways. And lastly, is it easier to communicate verbally or non-verbally? There's actually a continuation here, non-verbally, but I think it's because of the conversion, non-verbally. Okay, is it easier to communicate verbally or non-verbally? So I want you to reflect on these questions first. Okay, all right. Reflect for a few seconds and then we'll start with our lesson. All right, so I think we can now start with our lesson. So first things first, I want you to read on this article. So read the article written by a psychologist and professor at MIT, and then answer the activity that follows. So I guess we can just discuss this um, face to face because I would have to ask you some questions also. But you also need time to read the article yourself. So I'll be giving you time, and I think I have already. So I'm sure, by the way, I'm sure I have already sent to all of you a copy. I have sent a copy of this article, so I wanted to read though that article first, and then I'll also be sending a link to the site or to the YouTube video of Miss Sherry Turkle discussing connected but alone. So I think that would help also us to align our thoughts about communication and also enlighten us about what is really happening, how is conversation going now, how is if we are still able to to have real conversations or real communication. So okay, let me give also these questions. So after you have read, I'll just give this to you as your homework. After you have read the article, please answer these questions so you can reflect and for me also to make sure that you have read the article and we'll discuss this um, when we have already finally met face to face. So, understanding the text, what did Turco mean when she said we are always communicating and yet we have sacrificed conversation for mere connection? So, you have to give two examples that she provided to prove her point in the article. And then, do you agree with Turco that we are alone together? So, you have to give reasons to support your conviction. And do you think modern technology creates more disadvantages in the way we communicate? Why or why not? Okay, so please answer these questions and write your answers on a crosswise yellow paper. Okay, one half crosswise yellow paper. And please submit your answers once we have seen each other this week. Okay, next. So let's proceed to this quote, okay, by Carl Rogers in 1952. So he said, real communication occurs when We listen with understanding to see the expressed idea. So, okay, I'll just read this first and then we'll discuss this. I'll discuss this rather. To see the expressed idea and attitude from the other person's point of view, to sense how it feels to him, to achieve his frame of reference in regard to the things he is talking about. So when we are communicating, simply um, it's not simply an exchange of messages. Like once you have already delivered, you have already coded and sent your message, that's enough. Okay, and like you have already received, decoded the message, and that's it. So real communication um, is taking place if we decode what the person is saying, and we don't only decode it, we interpret it and we understand it. So we understand it in a way that we know what the sense is, what is the intention of the speaker. So it's not only the message itself, it's more than that. It's beyond that. What is the intention? There are a lot of messages that are, we actually can receive lots of messages, but the intention is different. So the message might be positive, but the intention is actually negative. So we have to know that it's actually more than just receiving. It's actually evaluating the message that we receive. So we have to know the idea, also the attitude of the person speaking it, the speaker. So how it feels to him. So um, we would know the pragmatic aspect, okay, and we know where that person is coming from too. So our interpretation might be different if we don't know the pragmatic, the context, the pragmatic side. So it's important for us to also know what the intention is with where the person is coming from to understand better what the message is about. Okay, so that's about Carl Rogers. So I guess we can proceed. So what is communication? So it can be defined as the process by which information, meanings, and feelings are shared by persons through a common system of verbal and nonverbal symbols. So it should be a common system because we cannot understand each other if we don't have a common system. Um, like for example, if I am speaking now in Chinese or Mandarin, then you cannot understand it. So it's useless. No matter how I try to deliver or relay my message, you will certainly not be able to receive it or understand it because we that's not common. It's not a common um, symbol for us or system of language. So it is not only um, it's not only a flow or expression of message, but also feelings. So we also have to take note of what the attitude, the attached feeling is when somebody um, is expressing or is relaying a message. Okay, and it should be common. It could be verbal and non-verbal. So nonverbal could be symbols, signs, or behavior. So there actually are different forms of nonverbal communication. So we will just deal with that later. Next. So we have here, that's about communication. So as a process, communication is characterized as first, it is dynamic. So it constantly changes, just like how we are communicating now. How we are communicating now is different from how people communicated before. So it relies on human perception that can change over time. So it's irreversible and unrepeatable. Okay. So once we already know how to judge a mon, then I don't know if we can still unlearn that, but it's already existed in the system. Next, it's also continuous. So it is an ongoing exchange of meaning So that is meaning sharing behaviors between and among individuals. So continuous, like um, in the market, for example, it cannot just stop right away unless they they're separating. Okay, so the speaker and also the listener have separated already, but it's an ongoing exchange. When you are engaged in conversation, it's an ongoing exchange of meaning sharing behaviors, not only the words that we utter, but also the attitude that we express, the facial expression that we show, who operate within a frame of experience. So when we are communicating, we bring with us also a frame of experience. That's why it's important to for us to have common ground so that we can understand each other. Because if I'm totally different, I have a totally different culture with yours, we might be it is prone to misinterpretation or misunderstanding. So sometimes it's quite easy to talk to a person um, who has similar experiences and similar interests, and we have the same frame of reference. So it does not have a beginning, an end, a fixed sequence of events. Also, all right. So next, also communication is adaptive. It adjusts to the changes that occur in its physical and psychological environment. So we adapt to the kind of communication setting that we are engaged in. Physical, like for example, if Natasa, if we are in a disco house, so we try to shout or try to use other ways or means in communicating if our voice cannot be clearly heard. So we try to use nonverbal cues and psychological environment. If we know that the person we're talking to is not so knowledgeable about something, then we try to adjust our language, we try to adjust our register, or it depends on the person we're talking to. Next, systemic. So it involves components. There are different elements also that are interrelated and interacting in a cyclic order. So when we are engaged in communication, there are lots of factors um, that are interplaying. So that could also affect the delivery of the message. So we have different noises, the field of experience. We have our channel. What channel are we using? And the capability also of the sender or the receiver to encode and decode. So those are some factors, and they are interplaying in the process of communication. And it is transactional. So every communication is a unique combination of people, messages, and events. So it's transaction. We have different transactions or communication processes involved in the market, in the office, in the classroom, or even online like this. So it's also different. It's always unique because we are using specific type of channel, different fields of experiences of the sender and the receiver, and we also are using different cues or forms or ways of communicating. So now we already have this online and digital way of communicating. So we are using technology other than face to face. So it's different cues, and what you can see only usually from the speaker is the until torso. So it's just the face. So not you don't really see what I'm doing here with my body and my hands. So it's not clearly seen, but you can only see my face. But I think that's already enough for there are lots of people who also prefer to really watch the face when they're communicating because they understand better. So, anyways, it's a unique combination. So it's transactional. Next, we will proceed to the forms of communication. So there are different forms of communication. First one is intra personal. So you have to notice this one, it's intra. So since there are actually two, intrapersonal and we have interpersonal. So intrapersonal is talking to when we are talking to ourselves. So this is self in the form of self-talk through internal vocalization or reflective thinking. Usually what we do is reflective thinking. We don't necessarily have to really talk to ourselves, explicitly, like, what do I want now? Sometimes we do that when we are facing the mirror, but we don't usually do that because you might be uh, kind of crazy thing to do when you keep on talking to yourself and you really say it. Sometimes, or most of the times, we do reflective thinking if we are brainstorming, when we're making decisions. So due to some internal or external stimulus, of course, there should be stimuli. When we are facing a problem, of course, we try to reflect. What should I do? Is this wrong? Is this right? What should I? What is the right thing to do? Like that. So it takes place within us. Okay. For example, you may talk to yourself about what you want to drink because of the internal stimulus of thirst. So that is the that is the stimulus that causes you to think, that causes you to communicate with yourself. Or you may think about a car accident you have witnessed. So there's something that, like a memory that came into you. So, in contrast with other forms of communication, so interpersonal communication is within us. Okay. Next, interpersonal. So this is now outside. Okay, it's not only inside us, but this is when we are relating with other people already. So interpersonal communication is a form of communication wherein individuals are engaged actively in the overt or covert transmission and reception of messages. So here we are already dealing with other people. It may be shown openly or not secretly, something that we really do face to face. Okay, so or transmission, we transmit or receive messages. So it might be face to face or it might be online when we are chatting. So that's interpersonal communication. So we are already engaging in a conversation with other people, maybe one person. So that's dyadic. So one with ourselves, of course, to another person. So there are two people involved in communication here. Like when we are talking to the telephone, usually we are talking to someone on the other end, on the other line. So telephone conversation, job interview. So you are talking to your prospect employer, okay, the interviewer, and you are answering the questions. So that's dyadic communication. Dyad, that means two, and doctor patient conversation. So if there's only one to one communication, so that's the dyadic communication. And another type of interpersonal communication is a small group communication. And this ideally consists of 3 to 6 persons, such as committee meetings, buzz sessions, or like when you are deciding about your topic or what you will include in your report. So that's already small group communication. So it's more than the Yadi communication because there are more people involved, but it's lesser than public communication because it's not also involving too many people. So, on the um, other hand, public communication is another form of interpersonal communication. So, this is now when we convey information to a large audience. By large, that means many, large audience. There are many of them, more than 10. So it is more sender focused because usually it's only the sender who is sending the message, and the sender is not requiring the audience or the receivers um, to provide feedback. Okay, usually this is done when, for example, one is the guest speaker and he or she is speaking to an audience, or like when you are in front discussing about something to a large audience. So that's a public communication. um, it's center focused. Okay, so it's not really a two-way communication. It's usually one way because it's only the speaker who talks to the audience. So there are also different forms of public communication. First, we have speaker audience communication. So this is when we talk to a large number of people who are gathered for some occasion, and the speaker here centers the communication event on the audience, and he analyzes the audience to determine the content. So when we are speaking in front of an audience or for a certain occasion, we have to know who our audience are. So why do we need to know? Because it will affect the reception of the message. If you are using hard words or technical language there, jargon, for example, and you are talking to elementary students or high school students, then they will not be able to understand what you're talking about. So you have to use layman's terms. You have to use basic vocabulary if you're talking to lower level um, learners or students. So it's also different when we are talking to professionals. So when you are talking to professionals, you will be using more on academic language. Okay, so it's really different. So the content also you have to consider the occasion. What is the purpose of your talk, and who are you talking to? So you will be basing your language and style also, and the listener expectations. What are they expecting from you? So you have to also consider that. And the other is mass communication. So this is when there's already a certain platform, media platform. So a process whereby media organizations produce and transmit messages to large publics, and process by which those messages are sought, used, understood, and influenced by audience. So this is when we are already, these are for people who are talking over the radio, over TV. So this has huge reach. Okay, so medyo malaki yung reach nila dito. So it could be the entire country, just like ABS-CBN or TV Patrol or these kinds of communication um, platforms. All right. Or you can also use Facebook though. Internet, social media platforms are already reaching lots of audiences. So yes, that's mass communication, right? It's not usually face to face. So next, let's proceed to the models of communication. So here we will talk about transmission model. So this considers communication as a one-directional exchange in which the message is purposely conveyed by a speaker to a listener. So it's one-directional, it's just transmission. So it centers on the sender and information present in a communication event. All right. And despite the inclusion of a receiver in this communication model, this function is regarded merely as target or destination and not part of a continuous exchange of meanings. So, what is this talking about? So, this is the model that represents communication process that's happening when we are talking in front of an audience, usually public communication. So it's one directional because we don't receive feedback or response from the receivers anymore. Okay, so this centers on the sender and also the information present in the communication event. All right, so this is regarded as target or destination, and there's no continuous exchange because it's more on the sender who is sending the message. It's one way, and um, it's intended to the target or destination, and it's just there. It ends there. Okay. So communication system is considered simply as um, source and destination. Next, this is how it looks like for this model. So we have here the sender, and it is delivered. The message is delivered to a certain channel. It could be microphone. If the person is speaking in front of the audience through a microphone, and then this has been received by the receiver here, and it ends there. It doesn't have another arrow here where there's a response or a feedback. Okay, so that's transmission model. Next, we have interaction model. So in this model, it describes communication as a process in which communicators change roles. So this time we change roles because we sometimes are the sender and we sometimes are also the receiver because it's already transactional. Okay, which communicators change roles as sender and receiver and produce meaning by exchanging messages with their own environment and experiences. Of course, we have to consider these two also when we are engaged in a communication setting because it will affect um, the delivery of effective delivery of message. So rather than illustrating communication as linear, it's not unidirectional because it is incorporating feedback already. So there is a response from the receiver. So it's two-way method. So feedback is conveyed as a response to received messages. So from this standpoint, communication can be described as producing exchanges of meanings among the sender and receiver. So this is how it looks like now. Okay, so we have here um, the first sender. So once the sender encodes the message, okay, of course, this is inside the common ground. This means that they have common language, something that they feel of common experience. So they understand each other here, and these are their differences here. Okay, on the other side of the circle, outer. So this is the area where they overlap, and that's where the common experience is. Okay, so message, and then this will be now decoded by the second speaker. So once this has been decoded, so when we decode, we try to, when we are communicating, it doesn't start with words. It starts with ideas. So we think, and then there's this idea, and we try to encode it using the language that we know. So we try to use words that can that can that we can use to dress up our ideas. So it will now be understood by um, our receiver or another person. So when we already have, it's actually just happening very fast. So it's usually unconsciously done. So we try to think of words that we can use um, to deliver our message. Sometimes that's why if you are speaking, it's actually quite easy if we're speaking in the native dialect or in our native language. But if we are still translating it to another language, that's why it's quite challenging for some to speak in English because we are not native speakers of English. So we still have to translate our ideas from our native language or mother tongue to another language. That's the target language there. And then okay, so we deliver the message now to the decoder. That's the another person. So the other person will try to decode our message. So with those words, if that if that decoder do not understand that language that we use, then there will be a problem in decoding because he doesn't know how to get the message. He doesn't know how to extract the content, the message from the words. So that's why it's quite hard to understand um, native English speakers sometimes, especially if they're speaking really quick or really fast and they're using hard words. So if we don't know the definitions or the meanings of those words, if we don't know how to decode them, it would really be hard for us to understand them. So that's decoding. And after decoding, after extracting the message, the person with his or her field of experience and culture and everything comes in already. The personality of the person, he will be using that to interpret the message. That's why sometimes if we are saying something, we also, although we don't have any bad intention about what we are saying, if the person has interpreted it wrongly because perhaps psychological um, like that person has this experience about something and really bad experience and he's interpreting it differently. So that's where misunderstanding or misinterpretation happens. And then that's in the interpretation. So this is another role of the speaker or the receiver, interpreter. So after interpreting, then if that person will produce a response or provide feedback, of course he will react to what he received. So he will then encode that in the same language. So this will now be channeled to the back to the to the sender earlier. So this time the sender earlier is now the decoder. Okay, so this now changes the role. So this time the sender earlier is the decoder because he or she will extract the message from those words and then interpret it based on his field of experience too. Okay, so that's what's happening in most of the communication setting in the classroom or anywhere, everywhere we go. So that's what we're that communication setting that we are involved or engaged in. So this is interaction model. Next, we have transaction model. So this now explains communication as a way of creating realities based on our social, relational, and cultural backgrounds. So this shows that communication is not a mere exchange of experiences. Okay, so it's not a mere exchange of experiences. Rather, it shows that we intend to build relationships, create intercultural understanding, form our self identity, and interact with others to engender society. So it's more than just interacting, it's transacting, also involving other factors such as culture, also establishing our identity with others. So we try to carry out these transactions. So it aims towards creating experiences instead of just merely talking about them. Okay, so this is creating experiences, not just a simple exchange of ideas but it's creating experiences. So it considers communication as an amalgam of our constant engagements with other people. Okay, so should you have questions, by the way, you can just ask me through email or through Messenger, Facebook Messenger. All right. So it's not, it's like a mix or combination. So when we go back to this one, it's a combination of our constant engagements already. So that's amalgam, constant engagements with other people. So this is how it looks like now. Okay, so this is communicator, first communicator, this is the second communicator, and this person is encoding. And as you can see, they are co-creating meaning. So there is a co-creation of meaning that's happening within this culture, within this communication setting. So here we, of course, have to acknowledge noise, different noises, which can be relational, which can come from relational context, cultural context, physical and psychological context, and social context. There are already different areas and factors that are interrelating here that can affect communication. So it's not only one time communication, but it's an amalgam, it's a combination or a mix of different exchanges or engagements that we have with other people. So we try to build, of course, we try to consider cultural, social context, physical and psychological and relational aspects in communication. Next, we have some important concepts that we have to know. So in that model, we have read social context. So this can be described as the declared rules or undeclared norms that guide communication. So there are rules and norms that we observe when we are communicating. For example, don't lie to people. So if you lie, that would be offensive. Of course, it would not be too good, and it will it will change the atmosphere of the communication setting if you lie. Okay, don't interrupt. So this is also a norm. So if someone is speaking, if you keep on interrupting, that would be really offensive, and it can affect communication. It can affect your conversation because it might offend the person and it might divert instead of focusing on the exchange of messages. You might be arguing or you might end up arguing. So don't pass people in line. Yes, because you have to wait for your turn. Greet people when they greet you. I think it's that's why many people will be labeled suplado because they don't respond when when people greet them. And then thank people when they pay you compliment. So sometimes when we want to be humble, also we don't really thank people. We just there are actually with different ways of um, responding to compliments. So some people, because it for some people it might be a form of bragging when we try to thank them, like "Nandito sa imong bag, uy," and everything. Thank you. So like you are admitting. So for some who want to show humility, or who want to show that they're humble. So they try, okay, okay raman eh, like that. So they try to lower down, okay, the compliment. So that's but this is one of the norms, okay? When you are being complimented, then you have to respond also politely by thanking, or perhaps you can return the compliment. So they love giving compliments because they also love receiving compliments. So you have to return the compliment too. That's for social context. How about in terms of relational context? So what is this referring to? So this involves our erstwhile socializations and type of association we have forged with other people. So when we communicate differently with someone we just met versus someone we have known for a long time. So there are actually different. Uh, okay, so we communicate differently with someone. So this there's actually a different difference when we were talking to a stranger compared to when we're talking to our best friend, right? So that's relational. We tend to open up more to people whom we are comfortable with, to people whom we know for too long already, compared to people whom we just know. Right? That's relational. First time encounters with individuals are inclined to be dictated by established rules and norms. However, once we have strong relational context, we tend to disregard or alter social norms and rules more easily. So that's also like um, making exemptions. So there are people who are exempted from these norms and rules if and only if we have already established, they have already um, they have already surpassed the barrier, the boundary, because we are have setting boundaries for us. And if a person has already been so intimate with us, sometimes it's okay. It's okay to, it's just for fun sometimes. It's just for fun, not to really follow the rules and norms. So they try to joke around, they try to tease them, which cannot be done by those people whom you just know, right? Next, or whom you just knew. So we have also here cultural context. So cultural context consists of an individual's self-concept and self-perception in relation to nationality, ethnicity, religion, social class, race, gender, and sexual orientation. So this is now these things are coming in. So it's about culture, our nationality, ethnicity, religion, social class, race, gender, sexual orientation. So that's why we have to be very conscious about these things because we might offend the person we're talking to if we are so tactless and we're so insensitive about these things. So we have not just one but multiple identities that influence our communication. So these awareness of these identities adversely impact the way we interact with others, especially when we feel inferior to their cultures. So there are some dominant cultures that we consider, like we have this Tagalog culture, and we also have this Bisaya culture. They're trying to um, establish their identities. Mauni ang mga Bisaya, mauni. This is how Tagalogs are. So sometimes there are conflicts also that happens if they are talking. So they try to dominate the conversation. So that those factors are already interplaying in the process. So I don't know, here in our region, we have Bisaya, Waray. I don't think we have our identities for sure, but I don't think there's an inferior culture here. But I think it's existing in the national level. Okay. Similarly, people with identities that are dominant or in the majority who think highly of their culture show more confidence in the way they communicate. So when we are also using English, sometimes we tend to be more confident and dominant because, hey, I know English and I can speak in English so well. So there's actually certain prestige in language there. So they tend for those people who are quite rich, and they try to they try to dominate conversations by using English. I don't know if you noticed that, but that's actually happening in some contexts. Okay, next, let's proceed to verbal and nonverbal communication. So here, there are two forms of communication. First is verbal. This is when there's exchange of ideas that occurs through words. So this is your cue word here. Okay, keywords through words. So this can be both written or oral. Okay, so verbal does not only involve spoken language, but it's it might also be written as long as there is a use of word or words. So allows individuals to exchange ideas, opinions, values, and suggestions, and creates an atmosphere where an individual can connect with one another or with another. So this is still expressing, and there's a flow of message, but this time it's using words. May take place face to face or through some media such as telephone. So it can be spoken, it can also be written, as long as there are words involved. Okay, next. So when a person engages in a conversation with a friend, this is verbal communication because it allows them to use words to communicate with each other. So, and not unless if you are having a conversation, pero kuan siya, actions, may pantomime, that's non-verbal. Okay, but if you're having a conversation and you try to um, use words, then that's verbal communication. And it might be through letters, various documents, memos. So these are now the written form. Text messages, bills. So people communicate with others. So that's verbal. Both situations exemplify verbal communication in oral and written form, respectively. And okay, since words are man's um, next. So we have here, I think it has been cut. So okay, let's take a look at this first. So we have here, right, since words are man's primary symbols, verbal communication creates a condition where transferring information becomes very clear. So it's explicit, right? It's really clear because you right away know what the person is feeling. You right away know what the person wants to say. Unlike with nonverbal communication, you still have to decipher and like decode. It's quite hard to decode, if a person is really good or not, or feeling good or feeling bad, just by using, nonverbal cues. So it's really better to explicitly hear that from the person. But sometimes with politeness, and if you don't want to really create um, any trouble or a rift against another person, so you just try to show it your nonverbal actions that you don't like it, because you don't want to ignite a fire between you two. So that's sometimes why people are using nonverbal cues. But usually, if you really want to express something clearly or explicitly, you have to say it, and you have to use verbal communication, right, for transfer of information to be clear. So next we have number two. This is now the second type. So this is now wordless exchange of information, thoughts, feelings, etc. between or among individuals. So nonverbal communication is where uh, we communicate through intonation, stress. That's why sometimes it communicates more than what the words are saying, what the words we're using are, because it carries more meaning. If you're angry, it will really show in your stress, in your intonation, your body movement, your gestures, facial expressions most often, material things also. This also communicates a lot, like our hairstyle, our jewelry, your personality will, like we can have an impression, we can build impression or make an impression about someone through your physical appearance, through your look, the way you dress, the way you um, you do your hairstyle, or you do your hair, or your jewelry. The kinds of, if there are lots of jewelries in your body, so that also shows something about you. Touching, kissing, and hugging. These are also other ways of communicating. Like if you want to comfort someone and you don't have any words to say, you don't know what words to say because the person is really so down, you just touch them, you pat them, or just hug them. So that's already communicating a lot. These nonverbal elements give deeper meaning and intention to words. Okay, so there is now the intention. That's why you have to look at the face of a person. If sometimes it's the eye, because eyes can never lie. Um, if a person is saying something, or like person is telling you that he or she loves you, then you have to look at his other cues if that person is really telling the truth. Then nonverbal signals can give clues and additional information and meaning over and above verbal communication, right? So they can give clues and additional information, meaning over and above verbal communication. So we can also say that, yeah, we can get a lot of meanings, more meanings. That's why they say action speaks louder than words. Okay, this is why. Okay, because we can get more meanings beyond the words expressed by the person. We can get the intention. We know the intention and authenticity of the person speaking through the nonverbal cues. And I think one drawback of using nonverbal form or signals is that it's vulnerable. It's more vulnerable to misunderstanding, because sometimes the other person might interpret it differently. So it's really better to say it outright. Now let's proceed to types of nonverbal communication. So we have here, the first one is paralanguage. This is vocalics. So what is this referring to? This refers to our vocal qualities that go along the verbal message, such as our pitch, our volume, our rate, the vocal quality, and verbal fillers. So that's paralanguage. If you are saying something so strongly, and your volume is really big, that means it's intense. So you are trying to emphasize something that communicates something. Like when you say, um, ayaw nga to. And if you say that really loudly, that is already intense. So if your mom tells you not to go, yeah, kalma pa. So I think that's fine. Pero kusog na kayo, so puyo na lang yun. Okay, so that's in terms of vocalics or paralanguage. Next, we have kinesics. So this is the action language. This refers now to our gross bodily movements, such as walking, eating. It also consists of gestures, facial expression, eye contact, and posture. So the way when you're slouching, um, when you're smiling, your eye contact. So if you look at a person, sometimes they say that I think it's according to research that when a person is not looking at the eye, or when the person is not looking at your eyes, when he or she is saying something to you, then that person might be lying. So you tend to be more confident. Confidence also comes with looking at the eyes because you have nothing to hide. So you're not scared of looking at the eyes of the person you're talking to. So there are actually other ways of also communicating. We'll just apply this um, in class. So sign language. So sign language consists of body movements that are used as substitute for letters, words, numbers, phrases, and even sentences. Okay, so that's sign language. So it consists of body movements that are used as substitute for letters, words. So instead of using words or numbers, you use sign language. And I think there was a question about this. If sign language is verbal, because for deaf mute community, they're not using words; they're using sign language instead of words. But it is nonverbal because there are no words, and these sign language are used or is used to replace or substitute words. Okay, so it is nonverbal. Next, we have object language. So there's also what we call objectics. So objectics refers to the intentional or unintentional display of material things, such as clothes, the clothes that we wear, our hairstyle. So that's objectics. So like our accessories, that's objectics. The decoration of a room, our jewelry, our implements, our machines, human body. So like everything that we are human body, not the body language. Okay, objectives. These are just the accessories that we use. So that's object language. So when people are fond of placing, for example, medyo dark things in the room so that communicates something about their personality too. Okay, it also um, has a message. Okay, like this is my presentation. I placed this one, and what else? There, I have this background. So yeah, we can you can actually see how what I'm trying to establish here. Perhaps a bit of chick girly, but there's also life here. A bit of relaxing. This is quite relaxing for me. So that's for objectives. Next, we have tactile language. This is haptics. Haptics is the one of the nonverbal ways of communicating that communicates a lot. Okay, when you touch, such as kiss or a tap on the back. So if you have no words to say, then you can just use this. Okay, it is the most elementary mode of communication and the first an infant experiences because we are embraced. So this also makes us feel secure So not only the words, because words are easy to break, promises are easy to break, but these haptics is this kind of nonverbal way of communicating has great effects on people. And from the moment that we were born, we already were communicating through touch. And our mothers or fathers, or usually our mothers, our moms, were really giving this to us. So to provide us comfort and security. That's what infants really look for, security. That's why they want to always be carried and hugged. Next, we have space or distance. This is proxemics. So proxemics expresses a certain types of messages. In America, there are four primary distance zones. Okay, so primary distance zones. We have intimate, we have personal, we have social, and public distance. So proxemics talks about the space. Okay, it talks about spatial communication. Um, yeah, it says here space or distance. So when we are talking, it's quite awkward if a person talk to us at this distance, because this distance is only reserved for those people who are really intimate with us, like our husbands, like our boyfriends or girlfriends, like our sisters, best friends. So only they can invade. We actually carry with us our territories. Where we have personal territories, and if anybody will invade that would now be offensive if you are not intimate with a person. So you should not go closer to a person if you don't have if the relational context is not that intimate. Okay, so intimate, this is reserved for those who are really really close to us, such as what I mentioned earlier. Personal, so these are for our friends. Like they can approach us really close. Or social, this is the social distance. This is what we usually maintain when we're talking to other people. And public distance, this is when uh, for strangers, okay, public. Or if we are talking to people who are like there are many of them, so we try to maintain certain distance. That's proxemics. So now we have chronemics. This now talks about time. So refers to man's use of time in sending certain types of messages. So time as a form of nonverbal communication can be best explained by the concept of punctuality, willingness to wait, and interaction. So sometimes if you really are patient enough to wait for the person to finish talking, then that also communicates a lot. But if the person keeps on interrupting you, because perhaps he or she wants to finish the conversation, so that also communicates a lot. Okay, and also for our punctuality, there's what we call um, polychronic and monochronic. So polychronic and monochronic, so this is referring to cultures. Like in the Philippines, we have this Filipino time. It seems like we have a different time zone. So we have a different time zone, because if we say 7 o'clock, our programs or events usually start at 8 or 9. So that's really Filipino time, and that communicates so negatively with other people, especially in Japan, who are very specific with time. Okay, so they are very specific with time. So monochronic. Um, so yes. Next, we have silence. Silence also communicates a lot. So this is the lack of audible sound or the presence of sounds of very low intensity. It can be best explained by the same: what is not said is as most important as, or even more important than what is said. Sometimes silence can communicate better than any words. So if there are some people who prefer not to really talk when they are mad, so if they are already silent, then that already communicates something. There's something wrong. Okay. Next, combining now verbal and nonverbal cues. So both verbal and nonverbal communications are part of the complete interaction process, and in practice they're inseparable. So we cannot really separate them. Because when we are saying words, there are accompanied nonverbal cues consciously or unconsciously. So a combination of verbal and nonverbal signals is a good style to effectively convey information, thoughts, and feelings. That's why if you really want to be a great communicator, you have to skillfully know how to effectively use verbal and nonverbal cues, right? Smiling, laughing, and using a friendly tone of voice while saying, "That is so funny," lets your listener know that you really do think the situation is funny. But making the same statement while using an unfriendly tone of voice accompanied by no smile clearly lets your listener know that you do not, in fact, find the situation humorous. Like, that is so funny. So that's like sarcastic. So another example that shows successful integration of verbal and nonverbal communication is using your finger to point the direction you're describing. So if someone is asking you direction, then about a direction, then you try to aid it by pointing using your finger, using your hand. So that makes message clear enough to be understood by another person. So let us now talk about the causes, if what causes misunderstandings and communication. So this is from the book Business Communication, and this there are some problems identified as major barriers to effective communication. What are they? So let's have this. The first one, problems in developing the message. The first one is indecision about the message content. So here, what is this about? So, due to the fact that the sender has too much information on the subject, which gives rise to difficulty in choosing what to include and what to exclude. So, there are already too many. I think you have okay. So, difficulty in choosing what to include and what to exclude. So, we have here sometimes there's there's overload of information inside, so you don't know how to organize anymore and structure what to say. Okay, so when the message has too much information, the receiver can get confused. So that's indecision about the message content. Sometimes if you have, like, this is what they call information overload. So if there are too much information, it's quite hard to process them or anymore. Okay. Next, we have lack of familiarity with the situation or the receiver. Lack of familiarity. So, what is this? So, here the sender should get all the necessary information and find out to whom the message is to be sent. So, this would enable the sender to state the message in a language that is appropriate to the situation or clearly understood by the receiver. Okay, so lack of familiarity. So sometimes we don't know the whom we are talking to. So that's why it's important for us to know to whom the message is to be sent, so we can adjust. Okay, we can adjust our language, whether it's still appropriate to the situation or to the recipient or not. Next, we have three emotional conflicts. So emotional conflicts are also affecting communication because there are times when messages has been delivered that would cause emotional disturbance to the receiver. So that will become now a filter, okay, a filter in receiving messages. In such case, without being defensive, the sender should state the message in a manner that would avoid emotional conflict. So it affects the delivery now, and it might communicate something else. So that would now be depends on how the communication will progress, but usually it ends with arguments. Next, difficulty in expressing ideas. So this is due to the lack of experience in writing or speaking that the sender may have and cause difficulty in expressing his or her ideas. So lack of experience in writing and speaking. So that's why sometimes if you are not, if you're, especially with the use of English, right? That's why I really want you class to practice as much as you can in the classroom to speak and write, because you get the more you practice, the better your skills will be, communication skills will be. So one must possess sufficient knowledge of language to express using appropriate words. Okay, so that's why sufficient knowledge of language. So you have to learn more vocabulary. Okay, so it would not be hard for you to express yourself, especially in English. Because sometimes if that's the cause, you don't know the lexicon, you don't know what words to use. If you want to express this idea, okay, you only know how to express it using your native language, but not in English. So that's where the problem lies also. So you have to keep on reading. So problems in transmitting the message. This time, it's in the transmission. So when speaking, the sender may find that the acoustics in the place is poor, or there may be no proper facilities for the audience to hear the speaker. Like if there's, for example, if the venue is too big and there's no microphone, so it's quite hard for those people at the back to hear the speaker clearly. There are written messages that are difficult to understand because of illegibility due to poor printing quality. So this also affects. So if the printing quality is poor, then it's hard to read. Or if your penmanship is also hard to read, right? When more than one message is sent on the same subject, there is good possibility of contradictions. So in such case, the receiver is uncertain and interpretation may be confused. So when more than one message is sent on the same topic, there is a good possibility of contradiction. So that also, I think this is more on no, not psychological. Yeah, psychological aspect or interpretation. Yes, that's right. Semantic aspect, semantic barrier. So it's on the message, the meaning. Next, when there are too many links in the communication line, there could be distortion of message. Like, for example, when the message has to pass through many people, there is a possibility of each person interpreting the message in his or her way. So, like message relay, that's actually message relay. That's one example of 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 you know what do you call that, changing the meaning or the changing the words. So one of my marites is really prone to misinformation because they tend to interpret the message their way. So when they relay that to another person, it will be different already. So by the time the message gets to the actual receiver, the message would have undergone change that would be far from the intended meaning already. So that's one. And then problems in receiving the message. So in reception, there would be also physical distraction. So there might be physical impairment, that's difficulty in hearing or poor eyesight when reading. So physical distraction could be physiological. This is physiological aspect that would cause hindrance in understanding the message. So how do we avoid this one? It is by recognizing these noises, and for us to repair and for us to adjust how to adjust and use other ways of communicating if there is physical distraction or impairment. Lack of concentration, this is now psychological barrier. So the receiver may not have enough capacity to concentrate and may get his or her mind wander off the message. That is, sometimes we're thinking of something else, like you have a problem, and then we cannot really listen to the teacher's discussion. So that's psychological. Okay, so when a person is telling us something else, so we cannot. That's a really big hindrance in communication process. So our mind is onto something else, and we are listening to someone, so we cannot really receive the message. Next, we have problems in understanding the message. So there is a different cultural background. This is cultural barrier now. such as education, social status, economic position, etc., which could become a hindrance in the process of understanding the message. So these things can also hinder if, for example, rich and poor, and differences in status. So that can really also affect communication setting. Different interpretation of words. This happens when the receiver is not familiar with a particular language. So this time is language barrier. Okay, for example, the receiver may not be computer literate and hence may not understand the um, computer language that the sender is using. Like, for example, if the sender is using acronyms like OTW, BRB, like that. So if the person doesn't understand that, then of course that person will not be able to decode that or decipher the meaning. So that is language barrier. Okay, or very clearly, like when someone is not speaking English, like Japanese or Chinese, so that really is a big problem because we really cannot understand each other. Okay, next, different emotional reaction. So the message consists of both the content meaning and relationship meaning here. So emotional reaction. The message may be clear, but the manner in which it is expressed or worded may not be acceptable to the receiver. So it creates a filter. So when the message is not acceptable, then it may give rise to negative feelings and the communication can break down. Okay, can break down and not receive proper response. So it will be a different response um, that will be given because there's negative feelings involved already. So that's emotional reaction. So I think that would be it for the causes of misunderstandings in communication. It is essential for us to acknowledge all these, so we know when or what causes communication breakdown and what to do in case there's a failure of the delivery of message. Right. So I think now we can proceed to reflection essay here. So using the models described in this lesson, I want you to analyze the communication that takes place in your family. So I want you to answer which model best reflects the communication between or among members of your family, and how can you make the communication in your family even better. So you have to explain substantially. So this will be a model, which model best reflects. So this will be about the model, and this is now your explanation how you can make communication in your family even better. All right. So you will have to write this on a one half crossway still and submit this um, in class. Okay. So I think that's it for our for lesson one for this lesson. And should you have questions, you can just send me an email through this through email or through Messenger. All right. So goodbye, everyone.